Welcome or welcome back to talking about cross stitch with the Stitching Owl. I'm so glad you could join me today. This is one of my favorite days of the week. I am amazed that we are over halfway through the month of June, but I am thrilled that here in Ontario we are finally to the truly hot weather that finally warms me up and lets me put away the sweaters and jackets. Other people are wilting. I am pleased. So if this is your first time joining me today, I hope you'll stay and see if the kind of stitching that I share is up your alley, and I also do a little bit more at the end of my video. I am happy to announce that this past Wednesday was my final day of teaching. It would be a little bit more challenging for me to actually have that day were it not for the fact that this community has embraced my music and encouraged me to keep sharing with you. So I thank you for helping me with the transition. I am happy to have time with my family, time with my stitching, and I have that little bit of music in my life for the studio with a couple of adults that are learning their way to teaching the theory levels and piano levels that I have taught. And yes, I'm still going to be doing some of my theory marking for the conservatory. While it's a bit stressful at times, it's what will continue to support my desire to attend the Stitch North retreats. It subsidizes those moments so that I can go shopping. So I am going to keep the music studio alive a little bit, and I will, of course, keep on making music for you. Now, in preparing for the end of my traditional way of life, there were different things I had to tie up, and as such, I actually have no fully finished items for you. But I actually did get some things finished that were on the way. So let's start with my stitch that I am doing with Amy of Renewing Stitches. She started the hashtag, "Do you want to stitch a songbird?" And out of the Cottage Garden Sampling series, it was the Songbird Garden series, I chose this particular pattern, Have Faith, to do. But after a restart, I kimmed it up and I finished it with fewer bluebells, no words, on a 20 count Ada from Evertote. Roxy Floss is the dyer, and I think this was something to do with clouds. I will put it below. So here I've got my bluebird. I only put in 2 bluebells, and for those of us that actually get to see this in person, I'm going to come up close, we find that there's a tiny ladybug talking to the blue jay. So at this point, I'm not sure how I'm going to fully finish it, but at some point it will return in that it will be fully finished. Now I have more songbirds to do. I've got lots more patterns, but before I do that, I want to finish my Herschel and Lucy pattern of the Stitching Mommy, which I'm doing with Carolyn Zook of Zook Stitches. So that will be the next thing that I pull out to do some serious stitching on that is mostly a bird project. So the question is, was that my only finish? Well, no, it was not. We chatted last time about my returning to a project that was my second dragon, inspired by Laura Stitching by the Shore. This is a pattern off of Etsy from JP Cross Stitch Pattern, and it's mostly monochrome with one other color. And here we go. My dragon face is done, and we have, it's not showing the really red eyes that it shows in person. So this is on a 36 count linen that will be listed below. And, oh, I know what it is. It's blue jeans, Billie Jean of Roxy Floss Co. again. And initially I found it a little bit hard to stitch on that linen, but I don't know what it was. Maybe earlier in the year there wasn't as much sunlight as there is now that we're nearing the summer solstice, and I didn't find it hard to actually stitch on this at all. So I'm not sure how I'm going to fully finish this one either, but I am delighted with the drama in this particular stitch. Humorously, I thought it would be a 1 or 2 day stitch. There are more X's there than it looks like. And I am not finished with my finishes. I did complete my version of the Artsy Housewife's Oona Owl. Now, I'd made great progress last week. This week I finished all of the medallions, and then I have to admit I studied the picture for a couple of days because there were some little flowers in there in the original pattern that weren't quite my style. And in keeping with Stitching by the Shore's monthly I Spy, I'm going to be posting this for something that was making me grouchy because I didn't want to stitch the little white flowers as they were shown on the pattern. And in a Kim It Up moment, I chose to use the Lazy Daisy stitch that my grandmother taught me as my first embroidery stitch. And I did that instead. I put them in the same places that the original white flowers were, but this is actually a very easy stitch. If anybody wants me to just show my hands making that stitch, just pop a message below in the comments because I'm happy to do that. It was something I got the hang of long before I figured out those French knots. I am very, very pleased with my Oona. I know there will be more owls in my future. The Artsy Housewife has actually a new Oona picture. But I must say that Yasmin Made with Love also has a Quaker owl that I'm rather interested in. And again, Amy and I, we try to Zoom one-on-one so that we can just chatter away. We are thinking that maybe in August we are going to start a Yasmin type stitch along, and that the hardest thing is that there's actually more than one pattern of hers that I want to do and more than one owl. So we'll see where that one goes. But those are my 3 finishes that I'm really pleased with. The only thing that's left to do is the age-old, am I going to put my initials in a corner? I will tell you that in the 1980s and 90s, every one of my pieces does have my version of my initials on the bottom and the last 2 numbers of the year. Of course, now we're in a new century, so I'm looking at those numbers going, are they ever going to know exactly when that was? So I will probably go in and add initials but they will be small and unobtrusive. I want them to fit the design rather than to jump off of the page. So those are my finishes, which brings me to my WIPs, Works in Progress, or PhD, Potential Happy Dances. So, right at the moment, one of the things I want to show next is my Vivster Quaker Flag. I'm, of course, doing the Canadian flag. And I did make good progress this particular, it's only been like 9 or 10 days since we saw each other. So in some ways there's not as many X's made, but in other ways I feel really good about my progress. So in here you're going to find I actually started on the center where we're finishing off this edge of the Quakers. The Canadian flag has a red stripe here, a red stripe over here, and then in the center there's white with this big maple leaf. So the Quakers are being stitched in a gray sulky so that we can still see the patterns and this white shows through. So it is the white that are the Quakers. We are actually stitching the background with this. So I am stitching this on linen that has been labeled 35 or 36 count. I think it's a bit tight for that. And I am using 1 strand of sulky thread. Now, the Vivster pattern actually shows the grid between each of the Quakers with black, and even shows that over here, the black continuing in the center. I decided that's not what I wanted, so there's maroon, and at a distance you can't even tell that I've added it, but up close you can see that there's a darkened line. So I have purchased a darker shade of gray, and that will be what goes around these squares. So this week I finished this. Either this one or this one. It might be this one that I finished this week. Actually, no. Okay, it was this one. And then I did this half and I started the other half of this. So now we need to have a conversation. I'm going to show the Quaker that I finished close up, and I'm going to point out something. I've done this completely according to the pattern, and if you notice on these 2 corners there's a box of 4 blanks. This one has 2 and this one has 1. So I reached out to Vivian and said, do you have an errata list for the Quakers that just happen to not be 100% symmetrical? And her response was, can you help me out? I would love to know what you've discovered, and then I can send out in a little while an updated pattern and make sure that Etsy has the newest version. So I've actually found in this set, I started on the right, most people started on the left, so it's different than what most people have done. I have 4 of these Quakers that have slight changes to symmetry. The one that I just showed you was the biggest change. Other times I was just changing a single X in a box. But what I did when I reached out to Vivian is I said, okay, I'm going to number the columns 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from the right, and then A, B, C, D, E, F going down, and so that I can say in 3C, check this part. And then I sent her pictures of my pattern keeper so that she could look it up. So I haven't heard back from her since having sent my pictures with my grid, but I have to say that I was really pleased with the response that she gave me, that she was totally open to just having a little bit of help from someone who's stitching the 2024 Quaker Flag Sal. So I'm super pleased with this. I think I've got about 15 and a half Quakers done. This is the full length, and I haven't found the width yet, but I am having fun. Generally, I try to put in 100 stitches a day so that I have 2 Quakers ready for you each 2 weeks. It was only a week and a half since we were last together, so I only got a Quaker and a half done. Oh, I don't want to throw that on the floor. It's white. On my lap it goes. So that was whip number 1. Now, Flosstube knows whip number 2 today is the stitch along, start along, sew along, however you want to put it, for the blue flowers in praise of pollinators. I almost said in love of pollinators, and that didn't sound right. So you can see that we have an absolutely exquisite pattern here that celebrates so many of the animals that help us to have the different flowers and foods that keep us going in this world. I really like Janine's pattern. Now, on the last one, so please consult previous Flosstubes to find out about the error that is in the backstitch of the bat. The other thing that I said the last time when she was talking was that this is mainly in DMC, but there was 1 week's and 2 crescent colors. And what she said was that crescent caramel translate to 841 in DMC. So if you're using DMC, you end up with 841 used as a general color, and then also as where the spots are for this crescent caramel. And at the time, I went, okay, that's fine. This time I discovered the spot where she was trying to alert me that it kind of mattered because you'd have to make a decision. So let me show you what I did. So you can see that my focus was this corner. Laura of Lala D, her focus for this month is this corner. I decided that I was starting to do this. You can see the top of an animal there, but I wanted to fill in the flowers. I did choose a slightly more yellow than this, and I put in my tiny butterfly and my ladybug, and in here the crescent is chili pepper. I think that's what it says. Yes, chili pepper. And she has 819 as the color. I found that quite chestnut browny. So I looked up on the internet and it said 818, and I thought, well, maybe that'll be more red. I still found it to be mostly appearing brown amongst all of this. So my ladybug and my butterfly, the red is 817. When I look at this bird is red, not chestnut. So I'm going to be using my 817 up here as well. And then this bird right here who's peeking out of the cactus, doesn't it make you wonder, like that long beak must be able to go between the prickly bits on a cactus to be able to make a hole to live in. But I bet it is the safest way for them to lay their eggs so that they are safe from other animals. In here, this little bird here, this bottom part and just above the black is 841. And then the face here is caramel, which means that if you do 841 for both of those colors, this bird, other than the black, is all going to be one color. You can choose to do that. I decided that I was going to make his face 840 so that it was slightly different than the bottom. And Janine had said, you know, there is a place where you're probably going to want to change the 841 to something else. And I think she was speaking about this little bird. Now I got in a bug down here. He doesn't really look like a bug until I get his antenna and legs on, but I'm not going to do any of the long stitches until I have all of the X's done. And then I'm going to pop this into a Q-snap so that I can do all the long stitches without actually marring anything of the stitch itself. So I'm super pleased with this. I'm going to next be putting in these flowers here. And I have to admit that it's possible that I will go up here, but I do want to get some of this done. We'll just have to see what happens next. It is a glorious stitch, and I'm just going to encourage you to also check out Laura of La La D, who is doing this as a pollinator sow as well. She's divided up the pattern into different sections. So almost everybody else has all of that center in, and they're working on the left-hand corner that I didn't do with the lemur. I didn't purposely decide to do something different than Laura. It just sort of was where things were led. Yeah. Now you're noticing that I'm taking that material off and folding it up in a new way. Well, that's because, let's see if I can find it. Yesterday was June the 15th. So I have a start, and it's now a whip. So this is an Artsy Housewife pattern called Dreamer. There is hashtag Dreamer, where I am doing this with Connie, who has been a commenter on my channel for the longest time, and we wanted to do some projects together, as well as Kim, Contented Needleworker Kim. Now, when we look at this, we see that we have a flamingo sitting in a teacup. Now, I noticed on Kim's, it would have been an Instagram post yesterday, she said, well, you know, I think I'm going to change the teacup to some sort of aqua or teal. And I was like, oh, that sounds delightful. At this point, I am doing this on the same 20 count parchment that my pollinators are on. This is a fiber on a whim fabric. Words. But what I'm doing for this one, I wanted to try to make this as a small. So when I do this one, I'm going to do this pattern twice. The first time I do it, I'm not putting in this over here. I am just doing the flamingo in a cup and the greenery. So let me see. Somewhere I have notes. Yes. So yesterday and this morning I stitched, and I got this sweep of the branch, and I decided I really had to do some more stitching this morning so you could see that it was going to be a flamingo. I know that Kim is absolutely thrilled to have these colors of pink. There's like 3 colors of pink that are going to go into this flamingo. So I'm finding this a very straightforward pattern. This is all one color. I might actually use a variegated green the next time I do this, when there's even more green in here. But even when you're doing the pinks, you actually have a sweep of a color so you can get into a rhythm and do an entire strand. So it's just, I think it's going to actually stitch up quite quickly. This is just the side of the teacup. I will do the teacup this time the way it's charted. Next time, I'm thinking I might change it up too. Thank you, Kim, for the idea. So this, I got 609 stitches in. If we look at the entire pattern, it's 4,291 stitches. So I've got 14% of the entire pattern done, but I'm going to leave out at least 30% of this. So I'm well on the way. The fact that I actually knew those numbers means yes, when you purchase a PDF from the Artsy Housewife on Etsy, it does go into Pattern Keeper. It is wonderful. It only took me 10 minutes to, actually it might have even been less than that. You just have to let Pattern Keeper know that there is a 2-line gray area, that's the overlap, and then when it shows you the different symbols, you pop in the numbers, and ta-da, is ready to go. So being that there's really only about, there's less than 10, I think it's 8 or 9 colors in this whole thing. This is a wonderful project for the summer. And if you did it on a bigger count of Ada, those of you who can stitch in the car, this is a good one. I happen to be like Amy and get a little seasick on land if I try to stitch or read in the car. Yeah. It's a shame, but it's okay. I can have conversations with my husband too. So that is now a whip, and we'll see how long that takes to finish. Okay. And no, I'm not done with whips yet. So we have been working on the dragon, the Year of the Dragon Sal that Samantha the Huga Stitcher and Erica of Fibers and Floss Canada have established. And I have chosen to do a dragon by Cute Patterns by Maria Bravko. This one's called Dragon Keeping Time. And I'm getting close to a finish. It's lovely to see my colors zero out. I've only got 3 colors left. And I'm at 96%. I just have 3 more sweeps to get the rest of this particular wing done. And then this is finished. I think, like, this is a Pellstitches 32 count even weave called Rumbling Thunder. And I have enjoyed stitching on this. I'm really pleased that I bought a fat quarter, so there's another equal size of this left for me to make another project on. It has been a delight to stitch this piece. Now, I'm going to tell you, if you stitch this, and I've been contacted by a couple people saying, I just bought the pattern, I'm diving in. If you're doing 2 strands, I'm using 2 strands of DMC, you need to purchase 2 lots of number 792. 1 set of floss is not enough. But other than that, this is delightfully, it's 99% the called for colors by Maria. I had a change of 1 yellow within this shading where I just used a DMC to DMC conversion to get to choose a close option. And I just think this works out so beautifully. So I am now at 13,767 stitches, which is 96.18%. If I do 100 stitches a day, in the next 6 days, I should be finished this. So that would mean I've actually finished, I'm on the way to finishing 2 dragons for Year of the Dragon. So I'm excited about that. Now, another whip was kind of a start, but not a start. We have a Stitch Along, Start Along, Sew Along with Annie B's Folk Art 12 Days of Christmas mini stockings. I'm doing this with Dottie the Stitching Scotty, Annie the Proper Stitcher, Alicia the Fanciful Flamingo. Let's see if I can remember everybody. Hang on. Kathy of 2 Needles Pulling Thread, and Nancy, oh dear, I've forgotten a name, I apologize. The Bougie Stitchers. They are doing this as well. Now, there's 12 days. One of the things that I have discovered is that the Bougie Stitchers are not going in order, and I'm totally fine with that. I happen to have started with 1, and I will probably go to 2 next. You can do whatever you want. So I showed you last time that I had completed 2 versions of the first day of Christmas. I started a 3rd version. And here we go. So this is a 36 count linen. This is a 32 count even weave. This is a 28 count even weave. So you can see the bird progressing to bigger. These 2, I was playing around with the colors, and if anybody wants my colors, I am making a sendable PDF of what I'm using. This bird is actually almost entirely the colors that are in the chart. The only thing that I have changed here really is the red and the green. I made the greens a darker green so it shows up better on the red, and the red I made a much darker red because the red I used in these 2 blended in. Now, so what are the differences here? When I'm working on 36 count, hang on, now I've got to look at this. Glasses time. I might have to consult my notes, which are not in the room. One of these, I'd say the 36 count is 1 strand of DMC, 32 count is 1 strand of Sulky, and the 28 count is 2 strands of DMC. Over here, I used Smyrna crosses for the eyes where there was beads. No. Here I used French knots. Here I used Smyrna crosses. And here I'm using beads. Now, I just started to bead this. And what I wanted to show you here is the top bead is stitched with white. I use a full X on the inside of my bead so that it lies straight up and down, not on a tilt. And I stitched this one in the gold that is surrounding it. Now, if I put it like this, maybe you can see a bit, but I wanted to let you know that sometimes people want to choose to stitch the bead on with the background color, And I don't think using red is a good choice here because we're surrounded by gold and this is a white bead. From my standpoint, I think stitching it with white thread or with gold thread works equally well. I don't think you can really notice a big difference either way. So I will finish this guy up and then I will start making my how to fully finish a stocking videos. I'm going to make 3 separate videos. I'm afraid to do it all in one long one and have a video that is so long my iPad says, no, I'm not going to upload this. So I'm going to do them individually. One will be finished as a stocking that you can actually put candy or a gift certificate in. One will be done as a flat ornament, and one will be done as a shaped pillow. We've been seeing like mice and bunnies being finished as stuffed pillows that you shape it according to the shape of the stitch. And that's one of the things that I wanted to do here as well. So you will actually have 3 finishing videos that are extras because this is a 5 Sunday month. You will be getting the extra video, and then I will be back to my regular floss tubes to be on the 1st and 3rd Sunday of every month. So there we go. So just as we're talking right here, there's been some discussion with a few of the Flosstubers about the use of Aida versus linen versus even weave, and the whole goal of making it as small as possible. I'm here to say that on this channel, anything is fine. If you like stitching on 14 count Aida, that's great. This is supposed to be a relaxing hobby that helps us to keep sane in a world that can be full of tension and self-doubt. There is no reason that everybody has to go smaller. When I choose to go smaller, because you have seen me actually stop a project to go smaller, I'm not telling you that your way is wrong at all. For me, there are times that when I envision a finish, I envision it a specific size and then go, oh, this is going to be bigger than that or smaller than that, and I change. I'm also keenly aware that this past Wednesday, I essentially stopped having much of an income of new money. And I know that if I stitch on a higher count with 1 strand, my floss goes much further. The other thing that I find is that for me, I am not somebody who takes the time to railroad my stitches when I'm doing 2 strands of regular floss. And sometimes my 2-stranded stitching is not as beautiful as I would prefer. So for me, that's one of the reasons why I go to sulky on 32 count. Now, sometimes on 36 count, 1 strand of DMC on 36 count. So there's multiple reasons why I do that, but it does not mean that what you are doing is in any way wrong. And don't let anybody try to tell you that you have to work your way to being able to stitch on 40 count. It's a personal preference. It truly is. Okay, and the last future happy dance. I don't think I did that correctly, but is my stained glass owl. My goal this week was to work on this area technically this is his cheeks and these are still his eye feathers. I did very well with his eye feathers, and I got most of this. I've got a little bit of confetti to go along the edge of this window pane in. I also added this very bright feather, and initially I was like, whoa, that's a little bit unusual, but there in a few places there's just a splash of color. And so I think it's going to be gorgeous. So this particular stitch I am doing on a 20 count Aida that's just a Zweigart that you can purchase at your LNS, and it is the 400 by 400 pattern by Sherova Creations on Etsy. When you purchase the pattern, it does go into Pattern Keeper with ease. You don't have to spend any time putting in any numbers. They give it to you. And if you want it to be bigger, like 500 or 600, or smaller, 300 square, you've got that all in one $14 purchase. Now let's see what I have here. I'm at 105,313 stitches for 65.8%. I couldn't quite get it to 2/3 in the 9 or 10 days that I had since my last taping. But I am very pleased with where I am on this, and I think I'm still on course to finish it in October or November, especially with the ability now to be able to stitch it sometimes in the daytime. Oh, what a concept. For those of you who are new, I'm somebody who I can only sleep for so many hours lying down before a neck injury bothers me. So I have to get up, and I'm usually awake for a few hours before I'm able to sleep again. And for me, those are the hours that I've been doing my stained glass owl in the middle of the night. So I know that Pattern Keeper resets at 4 a.m. Because if I'm stitching along and I suddenly go from 375 stitches to 0, I know, oh, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, is there anything else for me to do? Well, yes, there is. I want to remind you that Allison of the AZ Family Zoo and I are looking ahead to Christmas in July. It's also Jolly July because this is an It's So Emma pattern. Let me see. Yes, so these are called the cookie cutters ornaments, and you can get these little, they're like tart tins. I'm probably not going to do the tart tins, but there are 10, I believe there are 10 ornaments in here that are, they're quite small. I think they're like 28 by 28. Yes, they're 28 by 28. So their finished size is 2.5 by 2.5 on 14 count. So I don't want to do this on 20 count and have them turn out to be this big. That would defeat the purpose. I do want to actually do them on either 16 or 14 count. But we're going to be starting this on July 1st and having fun with this all the way through July. Now, last time I announced a hashtag, and we're just going to tweak it a bit because Allison alerted me that the way the letters went together, in the middle of it, we had the other name for a donkey sitting there. So we have changed the placement of Christmas to being at the Christmas cookie cutter. So hashtag Christmas cookie cutter. And we would love for you to post your stitching in, even if you want to start early, you can definitely do that on Instagram. When you do that, if you could tag Allison at the AZ Family Zoo and me, the Stitching Owl, we would really love to see what you're doing with this. There is so much potential in this particular stitch. And I also want to just remind you that not long ago, I announced Canada swaps so that stitchers and Flosstubers across Canada can stitch items that are 6 inches or less when they're finished, fully finish them, and swap them for Labor Day weekend. So you can contact either Michelle or Cheryl of Two Bay Stitchers, who, this was actually their idea, and then I just sort of joined in on all of the fun to do a Canada swaps. We'd love to hear from you, and I'm already hearing from people, before July 10th so we can set up our partnering. We will need to have your snail mail address in order to make this work. And it won't be a direct swap, so that if I sent to Michelle, Michelle won't send to me. I will change these up. And I'm looking forward to this. And then just a reminder that if you want to add more, a little bit of extra into your package, let's top it off at $10 Canadian. So the focus is actually on the item itself. I forgot to say something very important. The theme for Canada Swaps is to stitch something by a Canadian designer. I have given some ideas of Canadian designers in the past. Lisa, the Forest City Stitcher, reminded me that I missed a couple that are very important. So one designer that you could choose is For Boys and an NL Girl. And Darling and Whimsy makes a lot of these quirky Quakers that are perfectly sized for a swap. There is over 2 dozen different, this is just the sheep, but there's Christmas, there's Halloween, there's animals in general, so many to choose from. So there are 2 more designers for you to choose from. I'm hearing that people are on the search for their patterns, so have fun. And now I want to do a moment for shout outs. So Nancy at Calico Patches, she's a lovely new Flosstuber who was originally a painter. I believe she painted in oils and acrylics. And as such, she's got the artist's eye and is truly enjoying adding another art into her daily life. So I will, of course, link all of these people below. Dairy Barn Art has 10 videos. She's a multi-crafter and is a recent returner from StitchCon, so I'm sure we've got lots of stories to come on future videos. Soph. Now you're going to have to watch the spelling here because it's S-O-P-H, S-E-W-P-H for Sophie. She has a lovely variety of projects, and one of the things that sort of jumped out at me was her chattering about the whole whip situation, where she's actually quite a bit like me, that she loves to have variety in her daily stitch, but to get past 20 works in progress is probably not where she's going to be. So I know that right at the moment, being that I've added another one, I'm hovering around 15 on a regular basis. I get something done, I add something in. I do need to get back to a couple of the projects. So a Tiny Town will come back out this week, and my Herschel and Lucy will come back out. I hope you'll give Soph a chance and a moment of your time. I think you'll find her delightful. Now, I was talking a moment ago about Christmas in July, and so Lizzie, L-I-Z-Z-Y, just put up a video called 50 Free Christmas Cross Stitch Patterns, and I want to link the actual video below because there's some absolutely wonderful patterns in there if you want to stitch Christmas in July but aren't really wanting to purchase more patterns. There are some absolutely amazing patterns there. And number 50 is a pattern by Lizzie herself, which is quite lovely. I hope you'll actually sneak a peek at that if you're somebody who wants to stitch Christmas in July. And I think that's it for my stitching this time. It was a shorter period. I didn't have the full 2 weeks, so not quite as many different projects. So now for the moment for music. I'm going to throw out a name that is known to everybody, whether you're a musician or not. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. And most people, even if they're not musicians, understand that Mozart was a prodigy. By the time he was 6, he was playing for royalty. By the time he was 10, he was composing pieces, like even a mini opera. Like, seriously. It's amazing what this man could do. He was born in 1756 and he died in 1791. So he didn't even live 50 years, and yet we have an amazing amount of music from him. There is lots of stories about Mozart and his sister. His sister was very, very talented, and when they were children, his father, who of course was a musician, because this was the period of time that the way to become a musician was to be born to a musician. So when the dad went out to perform at different places, to take his orchestra with him, he would bring along Amadeus and Nannerl, and they would play. But of course, because of the period of time when Nannerl got to the age that would be considered let's marry her off age, which was quite young at this period of time, he withdrew her from performing for others. So Mozart went on his way on his own. He was usually accompanied by his mother or father while he was still a teenager, but his sister was no longer with him. Now, there's so many things that I could play for you that are Mozart. When I teach the history of music, one of the things that many of the textbooks tell us is that Mozart himself felt that his great gift to the world was opera. He was able to compose opera in different styles: opera seria, opera buffa, Singspiel. He could do it all and do it well. Sometimes he frustrated musicians because he composed in his head and didn't have to be sitting at a piano to noodle out tunes in order to know what the music was supposed to do. So they would be having a debut of something coming up and the musicians would go, "Sir, we don't have the overture yet." And Mozart would say, "Oh, it's composed. I just haven't written down yet. At least this is what the stories are." Sometimes we question the truth of a few of the stories, but it does appear that the many textbooks say that he was notorious for being fairly late in getting music to his musicians at times. How does this affect what I'm going to present to you today? Well, I'm going to present to you something called a Fantasia in D minor. This is a piano solo that does not have all of the restraints of sonata form that were used in the multi-movement piano sonatas that are absolutely fabulous, and at some point I will play something out of that as well. But this Fantasia is truly amazing. Previously, you've heard me say that I talk to students and teachers alike about music being the art of communication, that even when we have no words, we need to be telling a story. So, sit back and let me tell you a story with the Fantasia in D minor. Imagine yourself. You're at an opera house in your finery. The lights dim and the curtain slowly opens to see a palace. High in a turret is a princess with her maid in her bedroom. The orchestra begins their overture, letting you know how the princess is feeling right now. The princess sings, pleading with her dad, the king, to be allowed to marry the horseman's son. Please, Dad. Please? The king is angry. The horseman's son is just a commoner after all. The princess proclaims, "I will just run away." The king leaves and locks her in her room. The princess is left to cry and sing to her maid-in-waiting. I must try something. I have to get ready to climb out the window. So she proceeds to pack. The king has heard all of this, enters the room and commands her to put these ideas right out of her head and her things away. Princess and king argue. "Oh, please, Dad." So the princess races around, collecting her things right in front of her father, and she throws them out the turret window. Oh dear, I forgot that there's a moat. All of her things are ruined. Daddy, you just don't understand. This is true love. Is there no hope? Aha! The king discovers that the horseman's son is the long-lost heir to the throne of next-door neighborland. He can bless this marriage after all, and the princess is happy. There's so many preparations for a royal wedding. But we will live happily ever after. And of course, the orchestra gets to play the closing music. The curtain comes down to applause. The story is done. How was your trip to the Opera House today? I'm sure you've never quite listened to Mozart in that way before, but this is my way. It doesn't mean it's everybody's way, but it does help to show the influence that Mozart's other composing had on his piano music. And so it is that here we are again, at the end of the time, where I say, I hope that you had a needle, floss, and fabric in hand, and that while you listened to me do my show and tell moment, that you made yourself happy by making something beautiful. Thank you for joining me today, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.